Welcome to the Bookish Spell, your cozy corner for all things bookish. I'm Angie, your host, and each week I'll be diving into the magical world of books, sharing reviews, author interviews, and so much more. New episodes drop every Wednesday, so grab a cup of coffee and get ready to turn the page with me.
Okay, Jade, I'm so glad that you're here. Your book is really special to me, even though I haven't read it yet. So I really want to hear you talk about it. Tell me how you was inspired to write it.
Yeah, so I started writing another book just dealing with a couple of fae characters because I had just gotten back into reading after not reading since I was a teenager, and the books that I had really liked, they all had fae in them. And so that first book, I've put it to the side. It's not that I've completely abandoned it. I think I used to say I've abandoned it, but now I know that eventually I am probably going to go back and finish it. But that it got my mind rolling about there's a story that I want to tell. There's a message that I want to tell. And I was having a hard time figuring out the way that I could do that. So as I'm sure you know, it was inspired by my own history with domestic violence. And so there was a lot of different elements of that I wanted to represent in the book. So for example, she's in this kingdom that's in the sky and it's miles above the surface. And that to me was about feeling really isolated and feeling like the situation is almost impossible to get out of. And also so much so that it was just this whole other world to her below. She just didn't have any idea of what the world was like outside of that. And I think the rest just kind of snowballed from there. I included a lot of elements that I really liked, wizards, vampires, angels, all of those things, and use that as a way to tell the story.
It's so interesting. I'm super excited to read it. I know it's on Amazon. I seen it today. It's on Kindle Unlimited.
Yes, it is.
So I'm going to read that as soon as I can, just because of what you're playing it off of what inspired you to write it. I feel is really unique, and not to mention that I love fantasy, so I can't wait to read it. But what really drawn me to you is I seen your Instagram post and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So congratulations. That is amazing work what you're doing as far as being able to donate $1 for every sale to a domestic violence organization. That's actually really kind of you. So congratulations, and I hope you get to raise more money
Thank you.
to do that. I do have a question. So writing Fate's Tether was you always intended to write about your past, or did it just kind of turn out that way as you were writing it?
Yeah, so I definitely did go in intending to write about my past, but I didn't know that I was going to be so explicit about it per se. It was always going to be about her feeling like she needed to escape this relationship. But through writing it was also me coming to terms with the fact that the relationship that I was in truly was abusive, because I think that that's something a lot of women who have been through it can relate to. Is it actually abuse? He's not like this all the time, and am I just overthinking things, and am I being too dramatic about things? And I had a therapist many years ago very gently say to me, do you think maybe you were abused? And I was like, no, I don't think so. And then we just worked on that for a couple of years, and eventually I came to terms with the fact that I was. But I guess there was a whole new level of acceptance and understanding that came with writing about it, and choosing to be more explicit and on the surface about it, because I had a friend of mine. His name is Andrew Valenza. He's a really, really amazing guy. He's helped me so much with the publishing journey, as far as even just being supportive and always encouraging me to keep going. He donates, it used to be $1, but now it's a certain percentage of their gross income that they get from the books. Yeah. And This way he can kind of collect from all of the books that he has under his publishing house and his own books and donates that. And so that inspired me. And when I decided to make that donation, I was like, then I need to be more explicit about in my like marketing per se about what exactly the book is about and what it's inspired by, because I knew that there was always going to be that underlying message of like your story is not over, and even if it's hard and even if it's scary, that you have to keep going and you have to keep trying. I knew that that was a powerful message, and that would help other people, because it was something that would have helped me, is to know like as much as it sucks right now and it's hard right now, it can get better and it can be worthwhile. So yeah, it was just that once I decided to make that donation, I was like, I need to show other women that that's what this story is about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it. Well, that is truly amazing idea that you're doing, and I do hope you inspire other authors to do so as well. Like this doesn't just always have to be domestic violence organizations. I feel like it's a great idea for just authors, big and small, to be able to just donate. It's just a single dollar to other organizations. It's pretty interesting concept, I feel. So yeah, I'm interested in this. I do have a question about your character development, because I want to ask you so much about your domestic violence relationship, but I don't know how much you want to talk about that. Was it difficult for you to write your characters, or was any of the characters inspired like of you?
So I think with Cosima, who's the main character, she's not necessarily me, but in a lot of ways she experiences what I experience. Like I think like when it comes to the way in which we felt the same things is vastly different. It's just that I really wanted her to get across these feelings of like loneliness, a lot of like shame, a lot of not feeling good enough, a lot of almost being resigned to it in some ways, and but still having that feeling of hope. That feeling of like maybe it can be better, or maybe like you know, maybe that little voice in your head that's like, I do deserve better, like I don't deserve to be treated like this. And that's always a scary choice to make. And then as for Aurelio, I think, who is her husband, he is definitely fantasy evil, if you get what I mean. He's not like he is a jerk in a lot of ways, and a lot of his abuse towards her is more verbal, which I think is also a very common experience. A lot of abuse is verbal or even nonverbal, and not necessarily purely physical. And so that's what I prioritized in the novel, was prioritizing showing him in that way, in that like verbally abusive way. Because and then like his, you know, he goes on to be like very evil in fantasy world realms, and he's like murderous and all these types of things. So just all around not a great guy. But he, to me, was very easy to write because he's just evil. Like he's just a bad guy. I didn't need him to be redeeming. I didn't need him to explain himself, really. I think Cosima really when she is kind of telling her thoughts about how she views him, and what she's coming to realize across the novel is that she ends up realizing that he really just does things for attention, that he does care a lot about what other people think, and he's kind of insecure, and he feels like if he doesn't, you know, grip her with an iron fist, that he can't control her, and that scares him to be out of control. And so not necessarily like anything super deep about him, you know what I mean? And so he was fairly easy to write. Cosima, there were times where writing her was more cathartic, and it was more of like putting what I had been through onto the pages, but I never really found it to be difficult, because I think that these are feelings that I had been growing accustomed to and processing for many, many years, and this was just the snowball of it.
So something just came to mind. People who are often in a domestic violence relationship, the way that they see their partner at the time is not the way other people know them, of course. So do you think, like, as writing your character, this guy, that you wrote him like the person that you experience your EV with, or just kind of something that you came up with along the way? because I would feel like writing a book and then being a. I'm sorry, my daughter is crying.
It's okay.
What I'm trying to say is, I feel like being able to write a book, especially about this type of experience, and being able to put on paper what it is that you've seen and dealt with, because no one else seen that person that way. Did you write
Yeah.
your character in that point of view, or it just kind of came? You just wrote him as you went on.
I think I definitely played up a lot of natural characteristics that I think the person I experienced the DV from is like. I also wanted to make him different because at the same time, I wanted to make Cosima's story her own and not just a retelling of what I had been through. But what was really important for me was making sure that I was finding a way to represent what I felt through her own world. So through her fantasy world, through the plot and the things that she comes across and the things that are thrown at her, it was hoping that she would reflect like those same emotions that I had felt. I experienced things like stalking and invasions of privacy and those types of things, and so while those weren't necessarily reflected directly with him like stalking her per se, it was more of that feeling like he was always watching her or wondering if he was going to show up. And then the invasions of privacy, mine were with cameras and microphones and the alarm systems in the house, those types of things. But hers was more like, and just never having the privacy per se. Like he was always commanding her. He always was telling her what she could do and what she couldn't do, who she was allowed to be alone with, who she was allowed to be friends with, which of course were all things that I experienced as well.
Yeah.
So it was unique, I would say. Him, like Aurelio himself was unique, but definitely like almost like taking like a little trait and then just really like playing it up. Because my ex, I don't believe, has very positive views towards women, but isn't necessarily saying it outwardly. Whereas Aurelio is very like, oh, I think women are like this, and I think that they're useless, and this and that. And that was an intentional choice because I wanted the reader to understand his mindset towards her and the reasons why he didn't value or respect her. I wanted it to be clear that this wasn't just, oh, he treats her this way and only her this way. It could technically be any woman that he would treat this way. And that was very important for me to like convey.
So outside of your book, going through your DV in the past, going back to where you said you had therapy, and was that when you realize that you experienced that? So you didn't realize that you were going through that during your relationship period?
No, I absolutely didn't, because what I experienced was never physical, but it was true that I was completely afraid of him. And sometimes to this day, I still like get that feeling where I was afraid of being in trouble with him. I was afraid of conflict with him. I was afraid of just the host of things that, I had dealt with him. And yeah.
Wow. Well, I feel like it kind of worked out a little bit better in a way for you not to really realize that until afterwards. Because I feel like a lot of people that go through DV, once they kind of really know or understand that's what they're going through, they're even more scared with kind of the process of being able to.
When I was in therapy, I was still with my ex at the time, and I believe that we even went to a couples therapist. And my mental health has always been something that I had struggled with, definitely because of my ex as well, harming my mental health and making those things worse. And it's purposefully like stigmatizing me getting help, but also claiming that I really needed help and telling me that I was crazy and telling me that, and messing with me mentally. And so I think to a certain degree, he had really convinced me that it was me and that I was the problem. And so when I was in therapy, I was really seeking help for my really low self-esteem. I was seeking help for just not, depression and feeling like I had no future and not knowing what I wanted and feeling like feelings of being suicidal and all these different emotions that I was going through. And so I think in some ways I knew he wasn't a good guy, but he was also really good at pushing it back onto me and making me feel like it was my fault the whole time. And so when he had crossed the line into when I had found out about the cameras and the microphones, I had my son already by then, and my son was actually the one that found the camera, and that was the scariest
Wow.
part for me. Is I was, yeah, that's when I felt like I was in danger for the first time, where I hadn't necessarily understood that I was scared of him. I think I'd always like felt that way deep down, but I had never verbalized it. I had never said to somebody like, I feel scared of him. And it wasn't until that happened that I was like, this isn't okay. And I remember shaking and going through like the videos and feeling humiliated and feeling like really embarrassed, and like my privacy had been invaded so deeply. And I moved back home, and I actually know the day that I left, which was January 1st, 2020, because it was literally the first day of the month and the first day of the new year. And I
Yeah.
told my parents, and I moved home. And I remember laying in bed that night surrounded by all these boxes and all of my stuff, and it was just still chaos, and crying and wondering if I made the right decision. And now that I'm on the other side of it, and I have written about my experiences, and I'm very confident now in saying like, yes, I was abused because what I went through wasn't okay. And I remember at one point I had gained the courage to say to my ex, because, you know, we still do exchange our son back and forth, but I had the courage to say to him one time, like, you know, my therapist thinks that you abused me. And he's like, well, I think you abused me. And it was something about that moment where it just clicked for me. Like, he's never going to understand or admit to the harm that he's done. But there was also a really good, important realization in that, was that I didn't need him to either.
Yeah.
Is that in that moment, I didn't need him to validate what I had been through. I didn't need him to take accountability and say like, yes, I abused you. I was wrong. I was the jerk. No, because I knew that he wasn't going to, and that was going to be enough for me. That was going to be okay, because I was starting to validate my own experiences, and I was starting to validate what I had been through, and saying like, no, because if someone who loves you wouldn't have treated you this way. And then after a couple years, I met my husband, and we're together now. It's been almost 3 years. The beginning of next year, it'll be 3 years since we met and got married and stuff. And he has shown me how much I just was not being treated correctly, and has shown me just the whole new side of like love and partnership and trust, and like really caring and considering about another person that I just never got with my ex. And I remember telling my husband at one point, you know, you and I, we just don't fight. And we get in disagreements about things, or maybe we bicker, or somebody, you know, is having a really bad day, and we just like snap really quick. But we're always so quick to also say like, I'm sorry, I still love you. Like I'm just having a bad day, you know, those types of things. Whereas with my ex, every day was a bad day. And I can't recall, because it was a 6-year long relationship. I couldn't recall a time where we hadn't fought, or where we were in, you know, just a non-tense situation for even one day. And I couldn't think of one for the course of 6 years of being with that person. So that's, you know, was a really liberating thing to realize, was just that, yes, I have been abused, and I'm not going to wait around for anybody else to like validate that, because I know what I've been through.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm glad that you're in a better place now, and that you're with
Thank you.
somebody that can truly love you for who you are, and you can experience a good relationship without mental, physical, emotional abuse. I'm glad that you're in a better place now. Did you always want to be a writer, or did your experiences just kind of open those doors for you?
Yes, I have, I think deep down, always wanted to be a writer. So I knew from a very young age that I was really good at school. And it's funny because
Mhm.
I was so good at school that I truly had convinced myself into thinking that like what I wanted to do was, I would tell people from like 9 years old, I want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. And they would be like, oh, that's like a very, you know, hefty goal. It's, you know, very steep. And I'm like, yep, but I'm going to do it. And I pursued it, and I made, you know, I competed in medical spelling competitions. I competed in like, well, I just did a host of health clubs, leadership clubs, all of these things, really itching my way towards, I became a medical assistant. I went to college for it, and it just wasn't working out because I wasn't I was having a really hard time with math and science, and I was convincing myself that it was the math and science and that I just wasn't studying enough or I wasn't trying hard enough, but there was just not enough love there. So then I had pivoted towards psychology. And when I was doing psychology, I that's obviously also when I started learning more about myself and what I was going through and what I had been through and all of these types of things. And I fell in love with psychology. I fell in love with researching. I fell in love with understanding human beings and why we do the things that we do and how we can heal from the things that we've been through. And my last job, I was actually working with a crisis team for people who are experiencing psychosis for the first time. And so I was the case manager for that. And I was also doing counseling for people. And even as much as I enjoyed it and found the job to be incredibly rewarding, I also really struggled with being in an office and interacting with people in that like strict kind of like professional level where there are certain things that are demanded of you. And when I got pregnant with my youngest son, I had for the second time hyperemesis gravidarum. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's where you get really, 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 really sick during your pregnancy. And I was vomiting more than 20 times per day, every single day. I couldn't keep any food down. I was having to get IV injections and so that because it was such a it was a horrible pregnancy. It was so hard on me. And my husband was working at the time. So he was gone like 80% of the time. And I was just alone with our toddler. And so that very, very difficult pregnancy for me made me reevaluate a lot of things in my life. And I was really starting to think like, well, what do I want out of this life? Like when I have my son and eventually maybe I go back to work one day, like what am I going to want for myself? And I'm not really sure how it got brought up writing, but I know that my mom had always told me one day you're going to write a book, but she had always told me that she thinks it's going to be like a memoir or something. That's just always what she thought, because she thought I was going to be like this famous psychologist or this famous doctor or something. Because my mom has always, even though we have a tense relationship at times, has always truly believed in like me being capable of doing something like bigger than myself. And so she always thought that I was going to write like a memoir or something. And I had started reading, I remember during my pregnancy, I had started reading fantasy books. And so it made me remember why, what I used to love reading. And then I thought back to being a teenager, and all the while I was still pursuing outwardly medicine and science and math and all of these things, I was equally really into reading and really into fantasy worlds. And I remembered that I used to get these little notebooks and I would write like chapter 1 and I would plan out all of these books. And I had always thought about being a writer. And I think somewhere along the way in just growing up, I had convinced myself that wasn't an option and that I was never going to actually be a writer, and that I wasn't going to be able to make money off of that. And I was never going to find fulfillment in it. And when I had started, I asked my husband, can we spend like $40 and buy Scrivener, and because it's a program where I think I can write the book in it, and there's a lot you can do with it. And I was explaining to him cost-wise, because we were a little bit tight on money at the time, and so I was like, it just does so many things. It makes the most sense, and it's just I don't have to pay monthly. I just buy it one time, and then he bought it for me without me ever having really expressed to him very much before that I wanted to write a book. It was just like sudden, and I was like, I think this is what I want to do, and he was like, yeah, and so he bought it, and then I felt almost guilty. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have to use it. Like I need to write. And so I started writing in it. And then I came up with that first book that I told you. And then in November of this time last year, so it's been exactly a year since I started writing Fate's Tether. So yeah, and it just snowballed from there.
Nice. Is there going to be a second book for Fate's Tether? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm working on that
Have
one
you
right
started
now.
writing it yet?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. It's been going good. The only hard part is just that I feel like I kind of got stuck when I first started writing it, because I made it a good way into the story because I knew what needed to be told in the story. But then it got to like slower bits where it was about her and her journey. And what I want to show with the second book, because the first book is about Cosima realizing that like it's time to escape, it's time to flee. And it's still this like really, really tense moment until she's finally truly free of him by the end of the book. And there's that post-separation abuse period. I feel like you are almost detoxing from everything that you went through, and you're still panicking, you're still expecting things to go wrong, and you don't know who to trust, and you don't know if you should trust yourself. So I wanted to show her still struggling with her confidence, even though she gained a lot of it in the first book. I want to show that there's still an extra leg of healing, and that's also okay. That's okay that you still have moments where you're like, I thought I was over this. I thought I had moved past this. And it's okay to like sit with it and to revisit it and to still believe in yourself anyway, even though you're like, now I feel like a fraud. And that's kind of like a big thing that I wanted her to feel in the second book, is to feel like, all of this has happened, and for what? Like, can I get my crap together? Can I actually pursue this? And I'm hoping that second leg of her journey really connects with people, because I feel like that's where I was at when I was writing book one, was in that like second leg of my story. And now that I'm in this like third leg of my story, I hope that that's, going to be inspiration for book three, which is going to be hopefully the final book in the series.
Nice. I feel like in book two, like showcasing just that once you initially make the flee, that it's not just cakes and rainbows after.
Yeah.
That it is a really difficult time, and healing in all forms, I feel, not just with DV, is not easy. They give it like somebody breaking an arm or having a wound. The healing process is not, fun. So being able to like showcase that for other people to see just how difficult, and like bringing awareness to that, I feel is actually really amazing. Because I feel like I'm not enough people, have that awareness, especially just like from my experience, like coming home, after like 10 years of domestic violence, that took me a long time to realize that what I was going through. Coming home, and then everyone thinking that you're just going to be okay and back to your old self, and then everyone like panicking, thinking that you're having depression now and that things will never, get better for you, and now this is just the way you're going to live, sad and depressed. Made it more difficult for me. Not gonna lie, other than having like family members just give me the space I needed, just to kind of reflect and figure out who I am, because I'm sure you may know, when you go through that, you kind of have to learn who you are over again, because you forget what it is you like to eat, what you like to drink, how you like to dress, who you like to be around with. You have to learn that over again. So I feel like just kind of bringing awareness to that like middle ground of the healing process is so important for people to really start to understand, because I feel like my family members, and hopefully they listen to this and understand, they made it more difficult for me. Because they were constantly worried and trying to push me just when I wasn't ready, which kind of I feel like created a stall for me and just made me feel more bad about myself. So I love that idea, actually. I can't wait for you to complete it. I can't wait to read these. I know I'm going to love it.
Yeah, I had a similar problem with my mom. I had a similar problem with my mom just not being the most supportive, because I think him and I were very on and off again, which I think was a confusing aspect for me into believing that I was really a victim. But like I said, I was being stalked. So I don't know how much I was really, being given the opportunity to move on and to move forward. But at the time, that's what it appeared outwardly. And I also had a lot of problems with abandonment, because we had bills and a lease together and things. And at one point, he just like left literally in the middle of the night without saying anything and just blocked me on everything. And I had to get rid of my dog and my cat that I had at the time, which was really traumatic for me, because I was so close and attached to them. And I think he knew that. And I had to give up my home, and I had to move back home, and my parents had to like stress trying to help me and figuring all these things out. And he just like up and left, and only to come back a couple months later and basically resume the process. And so because of that, my mom had this idea for a really long time. And because he was also good at convincing people that I was also the problem, she also... It took her time, and I think it wasn't until the release of Fate's Tether that she started to understand that what I went through was also abuse, and I think that she's still kind of like on her way. But Cosima does get that first leg of like, I've made it out of a scary abusive relationship. And I know that the most dangerous time for a woman is right after she leaves an abusive relationship. So Fate's Tether itself is a representation of that, because she leaves within like the first 25% of the book. She escapes,
Okay.
but then he's still pursuing her and she's still scared of him. And there's not that finality yet that she's actually free of him. And that to me was supposed to represent like, it's still worth it. Like, keep going. And it's scary and it's hard. You just have to keep going. And I wanted to show women that like, it's not easy. It's not, because Aurelio is still pursuing her this whole time. He's still this big looming threat, no matter what she's worried about, no matter who she's looking at or what she's trying to learn about herself. It's still this like fear of him. And she almost has to come to terms with that, as well as that she has this fear of him. And so there's a moment in the second book where she's going to get a glimpse of somebody who reminds her immediately of her ex, and she's going to experience this like flush of all these emotions again, and she's going to be like, wait, I thought I was over this. But that's the part of healing, is that when you're confronted with it again, you have to come to terms with the way that you're feeling about it, and you have to say like, I'm scared and that sucks, and I have to learn to be okay with being scared. I have to accept that I still feel scared, even if it's been this many years, even if I'm at this point in my life, even if I just kept going and I kept doing my job and taking care of my kids and I never stopped to think about myself. Eventually there's going to be that point where you have to look in the mirror and you have to confront like all the ways in which like you never got to be who you wanted to be because of the relationship that you were in. And you have to make up for all of that time. You have to make up for all the time that you spent, under someone else's shadow.
Definitely. I feel like that's such a rewarding process. The part of when you're actually like looking at yourself in the mirror and like, oh, well, this is me. I'm happy with who I am. And like I should say in this way, looking at yourself in the mirror and realizing this is you and not feeling guilty of being that person, or feeling like you're crazy, or feeling like there's something wrong with you, is really super rewarding. And I hope most people do get to that point. I know it takes time. But yeah, it's definitely a long battle. It really is. So I don't know. One second here. I do want to ask you, like, I've been going back and forth a lot, but like I have so many questions in my head. One of them is like your like writing process. Do you have like rituals that you do when you start to write?
So that's something that I've had to learn, is what my writing process is, because I think when I was writing the first one, because it was during NaNoWriMo, I was basically just trying to get the book written and just trying to get that first draft. And then I was having a lot of difficulties when it came to publishing. So it was just chaos at that point. And now with the second book, I've had to reevaluate the way that I wanted to do everything. So from the beginning, I always had to be alone, because I can't do it if I'm with anybody. If my husband's nearby or anything, I can't do it. And then I also have to be at my desk. And as much as I've tried to be someone who can just write anywhere, I've also found that sitting at my desk gets me in the mindset of actually working on my book. But what I've also found to be really, really helpful lately, to actually getting more words on the page and is like an effective writing session, basically, is to immediately just open the document and just start write a sentence. It can be a bad sentence. It can be one that I delete later. It could be one that has nothing to do with what's happening currently, just the first thing I can think of, and writing that down and starting from there and starting the word spill. And even if I go back and I delete it, it's because I've come up with a better idea, or I've come up with something I actually wanted to say. And somehow I trick myself into working, because I will avoid it. I will sit here and say, okay, I'm going to write, and it's 9 a.m. and it'll be 6 p.m. before I actually start writing. So tricking myself into just writing something immediately, like sit down, open the document, write something, has been really, really helpful for me. And then I always listen to a lot of music when I'm writing. Obviously, it has to be things without lyrics, because I can't think very well if it has lyrics. But the type of music always changes because it just really depends on what mood I'm in. I know that some people, they put on something that's similar to the mood of like what they're writing, but that doesn't work for me. I have to find whatever just inspires me and gets me feeling artsy and creative.
Nice, nice. And you are self-published author, right?
Yes, yeah.
Hmm. Was that process easy for you? And how did you learn how to just do it?
Um, yeah, so I remember when I first started writing, all I knew is that I was writing the
Mhm.
book. I hadn't decided yet that I was going to
Yeah.
indie publish. And it wasn't until
Mhm.
I started interacting with people on TikTok in the like writer talk community that I
Mhm.
started learning about what indie publishing was. And I knew that I didn't want to query because I wanted to see my book out there and I wanted to see it out there quickly. And I didn't want to wait for the timeline that would inevitably come with traditional publishing no matter what. Like even if the stars align and everything goes boom boom boom, it still would have taken me longer than what I was doing with just self-publishing. And how I learned about it was by doing a ridiculously amount of research. I basically just devoted myself to constantly figuring it out and making lots of mistakes and taking lots of notes and asking lots of questions. And I noticed that just by being really supportive of my fellow authors and forming friendships with them, I have made so many friends, and they have been the biggest help because anytime I had questions, they would help me. And I remember I lost all of the funding for my book because of an emergency repair that we had that wiped out our savings and it wiped out just everything. We were broke. And I was like, oh no, that's the money that I was going to use for the editor, for the cover designer, for all of these things. And what I found was because I had formed that community, shout out to Jennifer Hoffman. She's absolutely incredible. She offered to do my cover completely for free and it's amazing. And I am definitely going to pay her for the next 2 covers because I'm so grateful that she did the first one. And then my friend Mackenzie Marshall also did the editing. She did that one for free. And I'm hoping to work with her again, paid of course, for the second book. And it's just like these people reaching out to help me and to work with me has been invaluable. It's definitely been the easiest way to learn about indie publishing because you can Google as much as you want, but it's easier when someone who's been through exactly what you've been through can tell you how to do it and how to fix it and troubleshoot it faster than you can find it online. So
It's so interesting just these past like couple months of doing this podcast and talking with different authors. Um, I am so intrigued with the whole indie author concept versus the traditionally published. Like I am truly impressed. There's this one girl who I did an episode with a couple of weeks ago. Her name's Zoe. Her book is called Away with Darkness. I was absolutely mind blown by what this girl told me. She wrote the book, edited it, created her own book cover, and published it all by herself with no help. Like that, like was so inspiring to me. Just as being an all my life, I've been an inspiring writer, but I've never wrote anything. Like I just find it so interesting how people, much like yourself, how you just put your mind to it and you're just doing it, and now you have this beautiful work of art that people from all over the world is enjoying. So I feel like just like for me, from my perspective of hopefully when that time does come, I feel like I will choose the self-publishing route as well. And I love because are able to stay true to who you are, to what you actually want readers to read within your book. So it is amazing. So congratulations on that. Like I don't know. It really like makes me so happy hearing these stories. I
thank
love
you. Yeah, I needed Fate's Tether to be out in the world. I needed to, you know what? It was an act of love towards myself. I love telling people that when they ask me like, "Well, why did you do it?" And I was like, "It was seriously an act of love towards myself. I'm showing myself that like I'm capable and I'm smart and I have things worthy of being said and heard and I deserve to like put myself out there and to have people like show me love. And a lot of people have shown me love. And I've also experienced a lot of hate at the same time because of just, that's the internet and that's what happens. But like the love has been so rewarding, and the fact that my book has been able to help people through the donations and actually helping real survivors. I just don't know that all of these things would have happened the way they did if I had traditionally published, because I just don't know that my original message would have prevailed through all of the editing and all of the other people's hands on it. Whereas through self-publishing, it stayed true to me and to what I needed it to be and what I wanted Fate's Tether to be. And I'm very excited for my future in self-publishing, because I don't think that I will ever query or try to traditionally publish. I know that some authors, they queried for a long time and then they chose to do indie publishing. There's some who knew immediately that all they would do is indie publishing. And I think for me, I just kept walking down the indie path until I like reached the doorway, and I walked through the doorway and I closed the door behind me and I said, oh my God, I indie published. Oh my God, I self-published my book. And I didn't even realize that I had really made that decision until I was already on the other side of it.
And I think something about just like self-publishing feels a lot more freeing.
Yeah,
versus
absolutely.
traditional publish. Like you essentially have to make go through, like you said, a million hands before it's actually all on the shelves. And I feel maybe due to past trauma, I don't think I will handle it very well. People telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think I would stick with the indie author route.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a scar or reminder that I can't for the life of me. Someone tells me what to do now, I run the other way. That's amazing. Well, I do want to have a few questions for you that are not book related.
Okay.
Just a little. Oh, actually, before I start with that, I know you have a podcast too, which I haven't got a chance to listen to it yet. You want to tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, so it's called the Indie Book Nerds Podcast. I host it with Morgan Christensen, and we release new episodes every Friday. We like to interview lots of other indie authors. That's been so much fun. We basically ask them a lot about their books, and we ask them specifics like what inspired it, what got you writing, why did you choose these elements, just really trying to get authors to gush about their books, just in case there's anybody listening and they want new indie books to read. They can definitely find out if the book is for them. But then we also ask a host of indie publishing specific questions. So we ask them, why did you choose indie publishing? What does indie publishing mean to you? We ask them about obstacles and how they overcame them, things that they find easy about self-publishing, surprises that they've had along the way. And the goal with the podcast is to help other indie authors not feel so alone. And we confront imposter syndrome, and we're trying to, because I think every indie, it's hard to talk about your book, because I think in the regular world and walking around with the average person is going to be like, oh, okay, you wrote a book. And so we wanted to give people the opportunity to talk about their book in a place with people who understand, who are going to be as excited to hear about their book as they are to talk about it, and to give them that opportunity and that encouragement to brag about themselves for a little bit and talk about their writing journey and all those things, as well as offering a lot of advice. So if we know that, someone has been really successful at book events, we ask them like, what is your advice for this? And so just basically trying to help other indie authors know that they are not alone, and there's resources and there's people who want to be in a community with you and who are also experiencing the same struggles that you're probably experiencing. So
nice. That's pretty interesting. I love it. All right, my friend. So my first question to you, for our audience, to get to know you as an author, is, do you have any surprising hobbies outside of writing or reading?
I don't know if it's surprising, but I'm really badly into keyboards, like really, really, really bad. There's something called mechanical keyboards, and you can customize the sound with the switches, and you can change out the keycaps. And I use it for serotonin whenever I'm feeling low, is I switch out my keyboard. And yeah, it's definitely blossomed into quite the hobby. It's all I think about, and I'm constantly Googling different keyboards and different sound profiles for them, and building my own online. Yeah, it's evolved. It was initially like, oh, well, I want it to sound good when I'm typing, to I want 500 keyboards, and I added them all to my cart.
Nice. Okay. Now, if you could go to any fictional world, what would it be and why?
If I could go to any fictional world, um, I honestly would probably choose the one from my book. Maybe not like at the scary moments, but the book has a area that's basically the Shadowlands, and so there's witches and there's vampires and there's wizards and all these just like orcs and all these different types of creatures. And at one point my characters go through what's called wizard fight club basically, and they all get in the ring and they're using magic and they're trying to fight each other. And the reason that I love it too is because I think normally we expect vampires to be like scary and all these other things, but in my book they're all like very nice and very collaborative, and they all like stick together and they just like to fight monsters together, and they raise each other's kids. And yeah, so I think I would like that. But also there's the Fey lands, which are incredibly beautiful and lush and green, and there's little pixies flying around and little sprites. And yeah, so I think that's the world that I would choose, because I mean, I love all of those things. It's what I love reading about. So
Amazing. Now, are you a coffee or tea drinker or neither?
oh, tea is gonna win over coffee, but I do love myself some coffee. I start every day with like a cup of iced coffee, but I could never give up tea. I would give up coffee before I gave up tea.
Mm. Now, we kind of maybe talked about this a little bit earlier as far as what you did before writing. But if you weren't a writer, what career path would you follow?
I think that's a really good question. I think if I couldn't be a writer and I was still like where I am today, if like tomorrow someone broke all my keyboards and was like, you can't do this anymore, I think that I would still probably continue trying to do a podcast type of deal, and maybe not necessarily for writing, but maybe for like hobbyist type things, because I'm also into playing video games a lot. The reason I know how to run a podcast in the first place is because I originally wanted to stream myself playing The Sims, because I was really into The Sims and I had all the mods and the custom content that goes along with it. And so I was originally going to stream that, and I made everything for it and just never did it. So I think that if I didn't do writing, I would probably do streaming or podcasting, and maybe do video games or something like that, or tech or something.
Do you still play video games?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been a little while because I'm currently drafting book 2, so of course that's taking all of the mental energy that I have. But my husband and my son and I all love Stardew Valley. We love the Zelda games. My son was just Link for Halloween, so
That's cute. Have you played the Disney Dreamlight Valley game?
oh no, I haven't, but I've heard about it.
It'd be like Sims and Animal Crossing. It is literally Sims,
I'll have to check it out.
Animal Crossing merged together. If you like Disney. I
do,
loved it.
yeah.
I played it like obsessively for like 3 months straight, 4 o'clock in the morning. It was so bad. But it was such a good game. Were there any books that you read recently that you really loved?
I think one of the books that I read recently that I really loved was an indie book. It's actually my co-host book, Morgan Christensen. It just released. And it's funny because I didn't intend for Morgan and I initially to start up a podcast together. We were just kind of following each other on social media, and we started like talking more and more, and I had been a fan of her book and was waiting for it to come out long before we had actually been friends, because she had a snippet of her first chapter and I read it and I really liked it. And then because we were friends, she was like, okay, do you want to be an ARC reader and you can read it a little bit early? And I was like, yeah, of course. And so I read it and absolutely fell in love with it. And the reason is because it hurts. It hurts so bad. It's such a painful story. It's called The Maiden's Husband, and in it, the women are in charge, basically. So it's a matriarchal society, and the men are subservient. But she makes these men like so sweet, and like they have such like beautiful character. And also there's evil men, obviously, because there's going to be like an uprising of men against like the all women and stuff. But she just made it. Oh gosh, she just made it hurt so good. I just felt like I couldn't stop reading it, and I can't wait for her to keep writing.
Aw, well, that's cute. All right. And do you have a favorite comfort food?
I would say ice cream. I'm really big on ice cream lately. And it's funny because when my husband and I met, I was like, I don't know, I'm not really like an ice cream person. And he really liked ice cream. And now I eat it all and he doesn't because I eat it all.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I have to go with probably the classic chocolate chip, but lately I've been liking this dark raspberry chocolate one. It's really good.
Mm. It's so strange that you say that though, because I remember 7, 8 years back, I didn't like ice cream. And it's not that I didn't like how it tastes. It was never something that I would be like, I want ice
Yeah,
cream.
same here.
Now it's different. I go to the store, we pick out ice cream. My daughter loves ice cream, so we have all different kinds of ice cream. It's like that's really strange. I feel like if you was like a maybe indulgent or like pleasurable thing, ice cream, and then maybe I just never felt like, oh, I deserve that. I don't know. But now I mean ice
Maybe, yeah.
cream.
I know. I love it now too.
If you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
So don't be so hard on yourself. I think that's just the number one thing that I would tell her. I think I would also tell her to be willing to believe more often than not that it's going to be okay, and to trust myself more. And I think that I probably never would have ended up in an abusive relationship if I had trusted myself more, if I had that security in myself. I think that, not necessarily saying that I deserved it, but I do think I was vulnerable in some ways that I had not intended, because I didn't confront like those inner worries in myself of like not being good enough and not being worthy of love. And even if I didn't have those on the surface of my mind at the time, because I was young, I definitely do now. So I think I would tell her, like, it's okay, and don't be so hard on yourself, and you're going to make it through, and trust yourself. And when someone is treating you not so great, to trust that feeling. Because I also had a lot of friendships that were really, really painful because I simply couldn't get myself to cut them off, even though I knew that I needed to, because they would somehow always convince me to like let them back into my life over and over again. And I think I let them because I wasn't secure enough in myself to say I deserve better. So that's what I would tell her.
Beautiful. Well said.
Thank you.
Glad you're out to a place now where you can kind of see more of that negative or abusive behavior, and it doesn't just always come from romantic partners. And I feel like people that go through DB do see that it comes from all walks of life. And a lot of people that know us, and as we go through that tradition, will label us the B word. But it's essentially you were being a terrible friend, person in general from the beginning. Now they're just upset because you're saying no. So I'm glad you are at that place in your life. Because definitely makes life so much better.
Yeah,
being able to just stand up for yourself, and seeing your value, your true worth.
Yeah.
So, all right, Jade. Well, it was a true pleasure speaking with you. I can't wait to read your book. I will definitely let you know my thoughts. I'm super excited about it. Do you have any last minute questions or anything you want to add before we close up?
No, but let me know when you've read it and send me your address, and I will send you some art cards and bookmarks and stickers and stuff. I just love doing that for people. So just let me know and I will send you some.
Oh, I will. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Of
Well, it
course.
was a pleasure talking with you. I kept you on here for quite a while. So get back to your day. I do hope to speak with you again soon, and thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Bookish Spell. I hope you enjoyed our magical bookish journey together. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And feel free to leave a review. It really helps. I'll be back next Wednesday with more enchanting stories and author insights. Until next time, keep the magic alive in your hearts and on your bookshelves.